Hi, everyone. I was given strict instructions that we're starting exactly on time, and so we are going to start exactly on time. And I have a very loud voice, and I'm really going to hope that eventually you will start listening to my voice so that we can begin our panel. Excellent. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Jennifer Ho. I direct the Center for Humanities and the Arts at the University of Colorado Boulder, where I have an appointment in ethnic studies, and I also am a proud and privileged member to be on the board of CHCI. I'm moderating the session, so you're not going to hear that much from me. The way that we are going to do this is that each of our panelists will introduce themselves, talk for about 10 minutes, and then we're going to ask people at your table. So if you are at a table with just a few people and you would like to have a more robust conversation, we invite you to sit at a table with other people. If you do not want to interact with anyone, then you do not have to interact with anyone. But we thought for those of you who went to the morning session that was led yesterday by Christina and Teresa that you might recall that there were questions that you were asked about the challenges of running your particular center. I should also add, I am the chair of the newly reconstituted administrative network. And it is because of the administrative network that I was able to hit the ground running when I became the director of the Center for Humanities and the Arts at the University of Colorado Boulder. I had previously been an associate director at UNC's Institute for Arts and Humanities. And I really want to give a shout out to, I'm looking right at you, Arena Polish, and Amanda Swain. Amanda's somewhere in this room, and Chris Chia, and Susannah, who's on this panel with me, because they are the people who really taught me about what it was like to do the nuts and bolts of running a center. And were it not for the administrative network, I think the learning curve on me hitting the ground as a director would have been so much harder. And these are also people that I have relied on through the years for their wisdom and the advice. So thank you very much to all who have participated in the administrative network. So I do want to begin with a land acknowledgement, and I looked up UC Berkeley's land acknowledgement from their Native American Studies Development Department, which recognizes that UC Berkeley sits on the territory of Huichin, the ancestral and unceded land of the Chochenyo-speaking Ohlone people, the successors of the sovereign Verona Band of Alameda County. This land was and continues to be of great importance to the Muwekma Ohlone tribe and other familial descendants of the Verona Band. I recognize that doing land acknowledgements is performative, feels insufficient. And the best practices when you talk to Native American and Indigenous scholars and activists is they want reparations. So my center did not have a land acknowledgement for quite a while until we worked with the Center for Native American and Indigenous Studies at the University of Colorado, and we came up with a reparative faculty fellowship that addresses settler colonialism. And once we had that, then my center put a land acknowledgement on our website. So I wanted to begin there in terms of the kinds of ways to talk with communities at risk in your local campuses. I also do note that the University of California, and my University of California colleagues can speak more to this, has something called the Native American Opportunity Plan that allows eligible enrolled Native American students to receive free tuition and other fees covered. And what's interesting about that is there's this question, why is this aid limited to Native American students from federally recognized tribes? And I will say the federal recognition part is important, especially for anyone from North Carolina, because there are various state recognized tribes. So it says, UC is bound by state law, specifically Proposition 209, which prohibits the University of California from providing financial aid to students based on race, sex, color, ethnicity, or national origin. University of California can provide financial aid to students based on their membership in federally recognized tribes because such membership is legally deemed a political classification rather than a racial classification due to the sovereign-to-sovereign relationship that the law recognizes between the federal government and federally recognized tribes. And I think that's also something that we've been grappling with in various ways over the last 2 days, is what it means to have sovereignty and what it means to have either our governments or our institutions or our centers recognize other sovereign states. So without further ado, I'm turning it over to Rachel.
Thank you, Jennifer. Good morning, everyone. My name is Rachel Arteaga, and I currently serve as the Associate Director of the Simpson Center for the Humanities at the University of Washington in Seattle. My brief talk today will focus on fostering collaboration and collaborative research at humanities centers. I'll also touch on the topic of staff recruitment and retention, which may open another line of useful discussion for us. I look forward to the full set of remarks from the panel and to our conversation with all of you. The theme of our panel is resilient responses to risk. The broader context of the CHCI annual meeting and the many discussions being convened here this week bring to light the ways in which each of these terms operates in complicated theoretical terrain. For the purposes of this session, for example, we might ask, from whom are we expecting resilience and on what basis? Can we imagine ourselves as humanities center administrators to be responsible for responding effectively to risks? In other words, anticipating possible threats to our projects, programs, and values, and proactively working to mitigate the damage they may cause? Or would our energies be better spent on responding to immediate needs? Might we do both? As I understand it, the task of our panel today is to be more descriptive than theoretical in order to generate concrete examples for a larger discussion. I would add that to do so, we will likely find ourselves in a mode that tends more toward reflection than critique. With that in mind, I'll offer 2 case studies from the Simpson Center that demonstrate administrative resilience in the face of risk. The first takes seriously the notion that resilience can function as a practical strategy for managing risk over time. The second case study acknowledges that we can be resilient to a fault through no fault of our own. The ever-present threat to collaborative humanities research is social and intellectual isolation. At the Simpson Center, our mission involves bringing people together in meaningful ways so that they can pursue research in cross-disciplinary contexts. As you will all recall, the global pandemic and its attendant closures and cancellations suddenly intensified the pre-existing threat of scholarly isolation. During the pandemic years, we followed what seemed to us to be a typical path, moving our programming and events online. Then, as the campus reopened, we continued to evolve our programs to support in-person reconnection. It has only been very recently that we've felt confident that the recovery from those difficult years has been secured to the point that we could offer programming that, rather than address an acute situation on the ground by working to support faculty in the face of immediate threats to their well-being and productivity, we could look much further ahead to truly undefined possibilities. I'll describe 2 programmatic arcs that bear this out. In 2021, we launched a new category called Faculty Summer Reading Groups. We grounded this pilot very much in the realities of the pandemic, and our CFP from that year reflects this. In it, we write, the COVID-19 pandemic and its resultant closures have disrupted and constrained traditional scholarly practices, from archival research to conference travel. Faculty reading groups will bring faculty together in conversation on an area of shared intellectual interest and serve to deepen the knowledge of the topic among participants. These groups may lead to larger scale collaborations among faculty in future years, but should be initially conceptualized as focus on reading and discussing recent research in an area of mutual interest. This language about the pandemic as the underlying rationale for the existence of this funding category remained with us until 2023, after which we described the groups more generally. But just as the initiating rationale no longer felt necessary to us, so too the category itself has come to feel less essential to our mission. In 2021, the first year of the program, we funded 6 reading groups, then 4, then 3, and in the summer of 2024, our executive board determined that we would again support 3 groups, and also that after that, we would end this category to make space for something new. On the basis of input we've received from faculty over the past year, what is needed now is time spent together writing. And so accordingly, we will pilot faculty summer writing groups in the summer of 2025. Now for the second arc. Our faculty summer research fellowship programs have also transformed over time, closely tracking to the threats imposed by the pandemic. We knew at the height of the crisis that our assistant professors, even with university policies being quickly put into place as an emergency measure to alleviate pressure on the tenure review timeline, were the most vulnerable. So we piloted a program for first book fellowships, bringing together 6 of our early career faculty in a Zoom-based cohort for the summer. It was a lifeline for their research, and by supporting them then in their individual projects, we preserved the important possibility that they would be able to take up collaborative efforts in the future. In our CFP, we wrote, "In recognition of the challenges faced by early career tenure track faculty in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, the Simpson Center will pilot support for first book fellowships during the summer of 2021. We will offer funding for assistant professors to give intensive attention to first book manuscripts that are near completion." In 2022, we swiftly moved on to supporting our associate professors. Our CFP will sound familiar. In recognition of the particular challenges faced by mid-career tenure track faculty, especially during the pandemic, and in order to assist faculty members in making progress toward their promotion to full professor, the Simpson Center will pilot support for second books. In 2023, our CFP for second and third books makes no mention of the pandemic, but in each of these summers, we brought the fellows together in cohort meetings, circulated work in progress, and held discussions. These were highly supportive, vibrant, cross-disciplinary environments for humanities scholarship. They were also protective, seeking to preserve possibilities for the future. This year, we have shifted to a paradigm that is both new for us and representative of what we might regard as a full programmatic recovery. In the summer of 2024, we will bring together 13 faculty fellows under the heading of a shared theme. The theme for the pilot year is religious cultures, sacred practices, and spiritual teachings. We are hoping that by gathering people together who are working broadly in the same area, we might spark new collaborations in the future. And generally, what I would expect is that some of these fellows will apply in a year or two from now for funding through our permanent cross-disciplinary research cluster category, which will spin off speaker events, courses, discussions, and publications. Now for the second case study. The annual reports for the Simpson Center, which I briefly reviewed in preparation for our session today, indeed show a great array of resilient responses to risk across every part of our work. But in one significant area, the only form of resilience available to us seems to be starting over. I'll let a series of quotes from these reports tell the story. It will be familiar to all of you. In 2006, our faculty director wrote, "In last year's annual report, I remarked on the stress in our small unit created by the resignations of full-time staff and by the reliance on graduate students. Time must be devoted to navigating human resources, searching for new employees, and educating new hires." In 2014, she wrote, "In spring 2013, we developed a new staffing plan. Designed in great part to address the vexing problem of turnover in a small staff, we built in some redundancy, created a new position, eliminated a graduate student position, and recalibrated 2 others. Before we could implement the plan, 2 staff members left toward the end of the fiscal year." In 2022, "In fall 2021, we were beginning to recover from the 1-year-plus lack of an administrative assistant with the hiring of a spectacular new administrative assistant, but have found ourselves in even more dire straits with the departure of our administrator after only 2 years, with 2 Mellon grants soon to close and financial matters in quite some disarray." This goes on, I will stop eventually. 2023, "Staffing is a chronic problem." With far too much time devoted to hiring and training staff. With so many people coming and going, it is difficult to keep our files and reports up to date, in part because our work is predominantly project-based, and there are lots of events. And I'd quote to you from our most recent 2024 report, but we haven't finished it yet due to staffing issues during the past year. "No amount of creativity, resilience, or strategic planning has changed the reality of our staffing volatility, not just over years, but over decades. There is no simple explanation, but we do know that in the humanities, salaries are too low. Our salary limitations both imply and predict the turnover of our most talented hires. We are constantly up against the place where risk management meets talent management. If we are unable to compensate them effectively, they will leave for better opportunities. I hope that in our discussion today, we might consider together ideas for making change in this area, as it is one that represents an enduring challenge for us in humanities administration. Thank you.
Okay, everyone can hear me? Yes? Okay. Okay, so my name is Aimee Germain. I'm the program manager for the Central New York Humanities Corridor, which is a consortium of 11 institutions across upstate New York. We provide the infrastructure, mainly in the form of seed funding, for humanities scholars to collaborate across the schools in our consortium. So this allows faculty to find community, to connect with others in their field or discipline who live and work in the region, and also to engage in interdisciplinary collaborations. So this is especially valuable for humanities scholars, given that there are often just a handful of faculty in a particular field at any one institution. So the corridor is a regional humanities network, and it's evolved over time. Our original focus 15 plus years ago was on symposia and large format conferences. Then we came a shift towards more kind of public-facing events, and more recently, like during and in the aftermath of the pandemic, people were feeling this acute sense of isolation. You're going to see some similarities kind of coming across the table here. So we began funding projects that were focused on building intellectual community. These didn't have to be large scale or flashy, just things that allowed scholars to develop relationships with other colleagues in the region. So thinking about this idea of being at risk, one definitive way of mitigating the risks associated with humanities center budget cuts, or at least the threat of cuts, is to find friends. So look for other centers or organizations that are doing similar things to what you're doing and reach out. That's the very beginning of forming a network. And what the corridor does is establish a pathway. It's a pathway for sharing resources, sharing knowledge, programming with people who are doing similar things, but at other institutions. So we provide a framework, a little bit of infrastructure, and then we help open up those pathways for folks to find their people. The working groups we fund form organically. We don't prescribe anything, and I'll give you a couple of examples of what we're doing. So in lieu of slides, I can add some links to the Padlet afterward if people are interested. But we do this focus on writing. We host an annual faculty writing retreat. It's on a lake in the Adirondack Mountains in New York State. It is a really big ticket item for us, but it's a destination faculty writing retreat. It's just been gold. It has become our flagship corridor program. It's in a tranquil setting. People get there and they just kind of melt into their writing. And it's really great to see connections happening and new networks forming over this, the shared practice of writing, kind of in isolation, but also in community in the same place. So in terms of the working groups that we fund, one of them is the Small Press Reading Series. This is a mixed group of librarians, creative writing faculty, academic publishers, students who come together in conversation with small presses, with the authors and publishers. This group has hosted zine making workshops, and they also hosted a workshop on using a letterpress. So this is an example of using the resources that are available in your region, because not every campus has a letterpress studio. They are kind of hard to find. So they were able to bus students in from across the region with funding from us to host this workshop and actually use a letterpress. Another group, it's a newer faculty group, called Cultures of Inequality in the Sinosphere. They brought in 2 speakers in the fall with 2 separate events. We paid for them to bring these people in. And then in the spring, they invited those same people back. It's a group of about 15 faculty. And then they held a manuscript workshop. So this is just a way of solidifying the connections that they had with each other. And they just had sent us an email saying it felt like old friends, even just after 1 year of working together. So they're doing the work of building relationships, and we're happy to provide funding and a structure for them to do that. So another group, which is actually an entirely staff group, is the Humanities Research Administrators Group. So these are the grant proposal writing people on our campuses. This group formed, and they are aimed at sharing resources, kind of commiserating with each other and strategizing about how to best serve the faculty and institutions that they work for, but they're doing it collectively. They've also hosted workshops on publishing and grant writing. They helped us host an NEH site visit a couple of months ago. It is a real community of practice, and this community of practice model is something that really resonates with me personally. It's also come up a lot here in the past few days. So people are seeking a sense of solidarity with their colleagues at other institutions, not competition. So over breakfast yesterday, we were talking about how some humanities centers are experiencing pressures through their local, state, or national governments. Regional networks can attend to these specific concerns for strategizing and commiserating. Directors, communication staff, whomever, can form a network. And I'll use Teresa's expression from yesterday. You can find your rare bird at a nearby institution and work with them. So we need to find more ways to foster these communities of practice. Who are your thought partners in the work that you do? What else can we do individually or collectively? My attendance here today at this conference is one attempt for me to find my people. So if you want to chat, let me know. And I will pivot a bit to a different but related topic. So I want to talk about how we communicate and report on the work that we're doing, either for internal reporting to your dean, provost, or president, or for stewarding and soliciting donors. So we need to be able to effectively tell the story of the work our centers are doing, the work our faculty are doing. This is often a challenge for individual centers, but reporting might even be more challenging when you're trying to report on outcomes from cross-institutional collaborations. This is something I've been struggling with. Institutional cultures differ, and storytelling can be hard. And unlike the sciences, there isn't necessarily a professional culture in the humanities of reporting. So there's often a challenge in getting humanities folks to tell better stories about the collaborative work that they're doing. The Corridors Challenge is getting vibrant stories from the 60+ groups that we fund every year. So we need to make a linguistic shift. We need to translate our work to speak the language of administration, even if it hurts a little bit on the inside when we do. I know this came up yesterday too. So someone had mentioned yesterday that funding a lab makes sense to upper administration, but funding a working group doesn't necessarily make sense to them. So we need to think about speaking in a language that non-humanities folks can understand. And maybe we just also need more humanities faculty in upper university leadership positions. So we need to do a better job of translating the work we do for those who deal with outcomes and impacts and deliverables. The notions of assessment and reporting are often immediate turnoffs for scholars, particularly humanities faculty. But if we think in terms of storytelling, then it's easier to grasp the need for this reporting and translational work. What did you do with that fellowship, or that research stipend, or that project funding? People often don't want to report out, or they just completely undersell what they're doing. People will often spend all their energy doing the thing that they're doing. That's what they're focused on, and then they don't pause to reflect on it or report successes. So how can we get our scholars to brag, to document their meetings or events or workshops, to tell a good story, and to help us tell their story? What are some strategies for finding, capturing, and communicating the stories behind our centers and institutes? So a related problem is more structural. People often tell us that they would love to collaborate, but it ultimately comes down to time, and they don't have enough time to devote to collaborations that don't count toward tenure and promotion. What interventions can we make as a regional humanities network to incentivize collaboration in a meaningful way? Public Humanities just started a journal, and that's an example of field building. Could we start a collaborative humanities journal? Could we award prizes for collaborative humanities working groups? So publications and awards are things that count towards tenure and promotion. You can put that on CV. So how can we best validate people's time and energy spent doing collaborative work? One way we can amplify the good work people are doing is by telling compelling stories, but perhaps there are other structural things we can think about. And I'll end there. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Susannah Smith. I'm the managing director. Oh, no, I can't see you because I put my reading glasses on, so you're a big blur. I'm the managing director at the Institute for Advanced Study at the University of Minnesota. Just a quick note on how we put this panel together. As people were indicating their interest in joining the administrators network, they were asked to list some of their current interests or concerns. And we just basically kind of picked a few of those to talk about. And so I picked working with Indigenous partners. And I mean, I could talk about some of the projects that we've done, but what I really want to do is talk about best practices. And I feel like what I'm about to say is should be glaringly obvious, but I'm going to say it anyways because it bears repeating. And I'm also going to be repeating certain things that were said at the Public Humanities panel yesterday, because everything that was said there about working with communities really refers to working with Indigenous partners. So there we are. And I'll get to risk and resilience, because that's all involved too, right? We at the IAS have organized or supported many projects with Indigenous partners, and I'm very happy to talk about some of those later if people wanna hear about them, but like large grant-funded projects where the PI is actually our director, other projects that we administer, small grants that we give to collaborative groups. Topics have included work on Native boarding schools, archival work, and work on community healing, building Ojibwe and Dakota language programs, mapping Indigenous places and names, integrating Indigenous ways of learning and knowing into education. So just a broad array. And we're also going to be doing the Global Humanities Institute in January on Indigenous communities responding creatively to effects of megadevelopment. So, more on that elsewhere. So anyways, best practices. Now, what I want to say about this is that what I'm going to say is very much framed in the US perspective, so my apologies to international colleagues about the details and language that I'm using that are very specific to working in this place. I'm also speaking as a non-Indigenous person, so my remarks are from that position as an outsider of working with other people. I have put a very short list of resources on the conference Padlet. These include the guidelines for Indigenous research that were developed by the University of Minnesota's Office of Native American Affairs, and a companion guide to research with Indigenous partners that were developed by the university's libraries. And I really recommend those. They will go into much more detail than I can today. All right, my first and most important piece of advice about working with Indigenous partners is that if you want to do this work, it must be a partnership, a real partnership. You can only have a partnership if you've already developed a real relationship with the person or people with whom you're working. As with all partnerships, your work can only proceed at the speed of trust. And, again, goes without saying, but I'm going to say it, this is particularly true when you're dealing with members of any community that has historically been marginalized and exploited. And from there, your work should be guided by what your partners want out of it. And I can't stress enough the importance of avoiding work that addresses only the needs or interests of the academic researcher. Again, true for all community engaged work, but in this case particularly. The give-get of the project has to be driven by the community, not by you. Two things there, be aware that when I say the community, there may not always be agreement among members of that community, and so that's something you have to navigate and work out and come to consensus. And in any case, you need to be prepared to hear and accept no as an answer, whenever you're, whatever it is that you're proposing. Part of establishing relationship and trust is going to be you understanding and taking ownership of your own institutions or nations or whatever's history and relationship with the people with whom you are working. So for those of you in the United States, I recommend that you look at the land grab universities from High Country News, their investigation of US land grant universities. Even if you don't work at a land grant university, it's an instructive examination of the relationship between higher education and genocide and expropriation from Native peoples. And there's a link to that on the Padlet as well. Now, in our case at the University of Minnesota's Institute for Advanced Study, most of our Indigenous partners are from one of the 11 tribal nations in the state of Minnesota, which comprise Dakota and Ojibwe peoples. The University of Minnesota has a long and, frankly, deplorable history with these 11 tribal nations. One of the most important projects that the IAS has supported is the Truth Project. Truth stands for Toward Recognition and University Tribal Healing. The Truth Project is a collaboration between the Minnesota Indian Affairs Council, which represents the 11 tribal nations, and the university. It was initially funded by the Mellon Foundation, thank you very much, as part of the Minnesota Transform Project. It is a Native organized and Native-led research effort to examine the university's foundation as a land grab institution and its ongoing use of the funding derived from those land grants. And it goes in all kinds of directions. It's gripping and chilling reading, and even if you're not from Minnesota, you can learn a lot about the kinds of harm that Western academic practices and assumptions about knowledge have had on Indigenous communities by reading the report, also linked in the Padlet. So I recommend that to you. All right, so before you start, this is all before you start, educate yourself, learn the history of the people that you want to work with, establish relationships, let your Indigenous partners take the lead in terms of what work you will do, why you are doing it, what you expect to get out of it. If you are doing any project with Indigenous partners, you're going to need to think about Indigenous data sovereignty. Now, that is the inherent right of Indigenous people to collect, store, manage, apply, and disseminate their own data. It's derived, obviously, from their inherent right to govern their own people's lands and resources. Indigenous data sovereignty inevitably brings up questions of use and access. Who will control whatever your project outcome is? Who owns the results? Where will data be stored? Who can have access to this data? Be aware that notions of open access to data and just open knowledge, these are not universal ideas. Some knowledge may be considered private. Not all people necessarily should have access to all knowledge. So depending on the project, well, first you may need to understand and acknowledge what these issues are going to be, and depending on your project, you may need to have a formal agreement about data sovereignty, which may involve your institution's lawyers, prepare for long meetings, uncomfortable conversations. The University of Minnesota Libraries Guide that's on the Padlet has a wealth of information about this. Okay, finally, risk. Large institutions, I don't have to tell you this, but I will. Large institutions, particularly educational institutions, tend to be very risk averse. People who determine what is a risk and come up with mitigation on an institutional level are generally not the people who have to deal with the unintended consequences of the policies and procedures that are created to manage that risk. That falls to us, right? And I've heard a lot yesterday at panels and outside of the difficulty of paying community partners in a timely fashion because of the series of bureaucratic processes and approvals that our institutions have taken to ensure that all payments made to entities are, legal and legitimate. And basically, this puts all the risk on our partners, right? Some of them have to carry a debt for months before they get reimbursed or paid. We've all seen this. When this happens with individuals from groups that have been historically marginalized or exploited, they take it personally. And although I've been tempted, it really doesn't help to say, oh, no, the reason your payment's 3 months late isn't because you're black or indigenous. No, we don't discriminate, we screw everybody over. That doesn't help. Anyways, this is something that you, as the representative of your institution, need to take responsibility for. And if you want to be a good relative to your indigenous partners, if you want them to be resilient in the work that you're doing with them, this is where you have to push hard against this imbalance of risk so that you can bring your institution into right relationship with the community. So be the advocate for transformation at your institution. Use your authority however you can, whatever it is, to whomever you report to or whatever. Do what you can to push the levers to make changes as best you can. Do what you can when you can, and that's pretty much all I have to say. Thanks.
So we have time, and what we thought we would do is to invite people at tables or seated in rows, however you want to gather, to talk about some of the challenges, again, that were brought up at the first session yesterday with Christina and Teresa. And I just thought I would read from the list of topics that, and thank you to everyone who joined the Google admin group. And here's a list of the concerns and risks that members of the admin group have shared. Staff, not enough staff, the capacity is stretched thin, not paid enough. Funding, not enough, not secure. Setting up a fundraising group / structure, getting help with fundraising. Space, not enough of it, not the right space. And calendars, not synced with the campus, too many concurrent events happening. Marketing, branding, communicating about the work of the center. Measuring the impact of the center's work. Increasing attendance, getting people involved, event fatigue. Strategic planning, getting faculty to apply to programs and grants, working with higher administration on their expectations, especially around grants, increasing student engagement, increasing community engagement, having the college / university / community recognize the value of the work being done at the center. So we'll take about 20 to 25 minutes and then maybe just pass the mic around. I do also want to remind everyone of the Padlet. So Erin sent a message this morning, Erin Fay, and if you look below, you can get right to the Padlet and see the resources that Susannah talked about. And also thank you, Teresa, for putting the Civ connection there. Okay, trying to gather us back together. We've got 2 mics. So I'm gonna be on this side of the room. Lou's gonna be on this side of the room. And we're just gonna keep passing the mic from table to table. Let's see if we can do this. I don't know if we can do this in half an hour, but I'm just gonna try and start. So, and I also believe, just in the Socratic method, so I'm just gonna really literally hand the mic to this table. You can share with us anything that you talked about, but especially if you think that there's something that would really resonate, like in terms of shared knowledge of something useful, we'd love to hear it.
I'm talking? Would you like to start? Okay. Do you want, you start off. Okay, I'll start. That's good. We'll tag team. Okay. Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Aimee Mepham. I'm the Associate Director of the Humanities Institute at Wake Forest University in North Carolina. We talked a lot about student engagement and thinking about that for each of our, the ways we connect with our centers and institutes, but also thinking about, the main mission of our institutes and centers were created primarily for faculty support and research, and sort of dealing with administrative pressure to, what are you doing for students? What are you doing for students? And how to navigate those challenges. And if we do, open up programming to students, what that looks like, how that's administered, how we get students to events. And also, some of us are involved in health humanities, so we talked a lot about the divide between medical school and undergraduate college, and how to create bridges between those institutions. I think I'll pass it to you from there. If that's okay, Meredith. Yeah, thanks.
Yes. The only thing I'll add, hi, I'm Meredith Kelling. I'm the Assistant Director of Student Research and Engagement at the Center for the Humanities at WashU in St. Louis, and so I think I started this conversation. But the other thing we talked about was the concept of eventing at all and how that resonates with the student population. Like if we start with the challenge of how do we get students to come to events, we've already sort of closed a lot of doors because students sort of might think of events as something that they witness as a passive audience member rather than the generative space that we find them to be as scholars. So what are the other possibilities? What are the other ways to get students to collaborate and engage and find this to be a generative process, not just something where you close the book at the end of the semester and you're done with that? Yeah, I think that's enough for now. Should we pass it on? Yeah. Actually, or do you?
Never know the moderator of the panel. This is my takeaway. So we were talking about several things, but we also did talk about how Humane Centers serve students and whether some Humane Centers serve undergraduate students and others don't. But in terms of thinking about who we serve, I will point out Susan Derwin from my, sibling campus at UC Santa Barbara, who said that when we're thinking about programs, we are designing programs to serve the humanities. And when we are serving the humanities, we're serving students, we're serving the campus, we're serving faculty, we're serving the community, and that these are should all be self-reinforcing in the way that we're doing our programming. And that really struck me. So.
Thanks. I'm Stephanie Cook. I'm director of the Center for the Humanities at WashU in St. Louis, and we had a kind of two-pronged conversation. We talked a little bit about staff, how to support staff, how to empower staff, especially when, not always, but sometimes faculty can be tricky to deal with. As a faculty member, I understand that. And then we have Aimee Freud, who's a new director, and so we had the kind of roundtable about what would both of the staff and kind of directors at the table think is useful for a new director to learn. We talked a little bit about boards, how to manage and deal with external boards, who should be on your external board. Should it be people with deep pockets like my university wants me to have? Or should it be community members who have a real stake in the community? How do you navigate that difference, and how do you compensate people when your budget is low? And Tina had some fabulous ideas that they do in BARD, offering university sort of emails and access to certain things on campus in lieu of payment. Is there anything else that we talked about? Oh, and how it's better to meet in person and build contacts in person, even if it's just a quick coffee, than sending an email that nobody wants to read. So thanks.
I see Russ Castronovo is at a table.
What did you guys want me to talk about? So hi, I'm Russ Castronovo from University of Wisconsin-Madison, and we were talking about creating groups of donors and how you might do that. And especially, we were led to do this because, and I was part of a group with that was organized by Olka Anjara, who I don't know if she's here now. I think she was here yesterday, but to talk about the role that humanities centers can play vis-a-vis the Mellon Foundation, with different priorities changing in terms of Mellon, which I think has made it very difficult for universities and regularly formatted institutions to get grant dollars. So we kind of thought it would be important to go and find our own money. And we set up a friends group to do this. And it means that we have to operate outside of or parallel to university structures of fundraising, because universities are kind of interested in, as they should be, into donors who have very deep pockets. For humanities donors, we find people who have kind of modest pockets, and quite frankly, the University Foundation of Charitable Giving is not interested in those people. So we've kind of had to take this on our own. And what I realized, and I thought this was kind of the takeaway, was that the effort was more important than the dollar value raised. Because, and what I mean by this is that we could say to the university who's funding us, we can say, actually, we need $100,000 less this year because this is what we raised. And that buys us an incredible amount of goodwill, even if our operating costs are much beyond that, because then we are able to change the narrative of rather than being useless, weak humanities people who can't raise money, we are actually trying to do something on our own. And in this context, I would just kind of point forward really quickly to the piece that we all read by Chris Newfield that we'll be discussing tomorrow, which I think is really important to think about in this context of research dollars being so few and far between for humanities scholars. What kind of alternate narrative can you set up so that your center is being perceived as a bootstraps center? And even, I think that's really important to have that narrative even above and beyond any dollar value that you're generating, that you're just not, humanities is all about utilitarian, it has this fight with utilitarianism. We're just trying to fight, uselessness, and to show that we actually have a value in, and doing so, I think that's been a really salutary message, where we are now seen as as an important player in fundraising, even if, again, in a minor level, but just having made that effort, I think has been really important in terms of how we're perceived across campus. So thanks, Jennifer, for the invitation to share some of that.
We're passing. Are you going to pass? All right. Passing is an option. Ooh.
Hi, my name is Irena Polic. I'm from UC Santa Cruz. I'm the managing director. I actually want to talk about the valuing of the humanities, or devaluing. On our campus, we tend to say that we're cheap, that we don't cost a lot of money. The NEH fellowships are $60,000, and that's supposed to give a faculty a year off. And I think that's something that we as a community really need to fight. So on our campus, I've really been fighting this on the staff side, where basically we had to convince the university that a managing director of a research institute in the humanities is as worthwhile or more as a managing director of the Genomics Institute. And it took me 15 years. But we did it, and all the managing directors in the UC systems have now gotten raises. We basically banded together. All of our staff have gotten raises. And so I think it's really, really important that we need to pay our staff. We actually don't have turnover problems, and I'll give it to Saskia. She's one of my staff. She can tell you more. We could, of course, use more staff always. But we have a great culture, we pay our staff, we train them, and we always, every year, make sure that they're getting professional development and that they have a way out of the institute as well. Because sometimes staff just get stuck. And I don't think I'm a successful manager if my staff is there for 15 years. I've been there for 15 years, but I've had different kinds of professional development in my job. So please pay your staff. Saskia.
Hi. Well, thank you for being an advocate for staff. And so, yeah, I work at the Humanities Institute with Irena. And just to speak to the culture piece, I think it's just been tremendous, sort of the holistic care we have about the individuals that are a part of our team, and that we've really spent time together, get to know each other, care about each other's families and lives outside of work as well. And then this investment in professional development and advocating for staff members that you've done, Irena, and giving us opportunities and belief in the mission, and really opportunities. You know, Humanities Institute Center can take so many different directions, but really hearing from the members that are of the team, what are you passionate about? How are you committed to this mission? And that I think also really retains us and keeps us passionate about the work that we're doing. So, all important pieces. Anyone want to add?
Yeah, so I got, is that on? It is, okay. Anyways, I got nominated for my table, so I figured I might as well speak for the table then. So we started with the question, I'm Paul Fleming from Cornell. We started with the question of just thinking about what is the function of a humanities centers today in 2024, which is certainly different than 2014 or 2004. And to start with that question, and you know, it was interesting, the difference between, you know, at Cornell there is just eventification fatigue. It's just like that is no longer our role, is bringing in speakers, conferences. People have enough of it coming out of COVID. They have other wants and needs, and that's largely, they want to get back to their work. They want to publish. People feel which they did, they lost 2 to 3 years of their lives, promotion, et cetera. So, but that's not the same. Other places are saying, no, we're the one place in town that's doing that. So I think each campus can be different, and I would highly suggest listening to your colleagues. I mean, the first thing would just be sit down and say, talk to your colleagues, what do they want from the center today? Then we went around the table and we shared different ways of bringing, so the thing we kind of discussed is creating, fostering social intellectual community as like a main function right now, and organizing that around the thing that we do and the thing that we feel is lacking, which is writing. And different models of writing retreats can be completely no cost, low cost, just bringing people into the space, having Fridays or Mondays dedicated for a morning session that can be, other than coffee, cost-free. People go to lunch after, to much more advanced types of things of writing groups where people get a small stipend, et cetera. But basically creating a space, an environment, and some degree of accountability for people to get their work done that then often dovetails into community workshopping of manuscripts and things like that. So, I mean, that was one of the main things. And then we talked quite a bit, and there's many different models. I'm happy to talk about that at lunch. We did talk about the ways of also bringing graduate students into that, whether as facilitators or as equal writers. They have the same needs that we do as faculty. So opening that up to graduate students and having it being basically an intellectual community of graduate students and faculty working together. Also then, Joyce brought up different ways of having faculty graduate students take the lead on intellectual movements of bringing things into the public spheres as far as coffee shops, local bookstores and things like that. We did talk about staff and just I was director for 7 years at Cornell, and I think Julie can help me with this, but I think we hired like 14 people, and there was constant turnover. And I'd like to think it's not because I'm a terrible boss, but it may be because of that. But it is the very issues of basically it's super talented people who are great multitaskers, can do multiple things, and there's other opportunities being stuck in place. And Amanda, reminded me and reminded all of us that we really need to fight each and every year to have at Cornell it's called bandwidth, that you can promote in place, ways of getting beyond the regular raise, but actually moving up the grade. And really, even if it doesn't work, every year to hammer at that when it comes to the annual report. I think that's really important. The staff, as we just saw from the panel, is absolutely amazing. Our work would be impossible. They're the true intellects and everything behind what we do, to do everything we can to support the staff and try to promote them in place to keep them. And then the other thing we talked about, which I'd like to share more, is I think one thing CHCI could do is collect different examples of language for impact, different ways that we can make the case, successful things. So one thing for the Padlet, if you have this argument worked, if we could share that on the Padlet and we could collect that, I think this would be invaluable. I had recent interactions with our Vice President for Research and Innovation that was just it was mind-blowing how little they know or care. And so we need to find language that can help us make the case to them. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
Let me talk smell.
Anyone want to volunteer, or would this table like the opportunity to share out anything? No? I'll just keep going around the room. Would this table like to share anything? I'm going to give it to Jim.
Okay, I'll talk about two different things. One is for a very small center that has one full-time staff person. It's a whole different question, I think, about how to keep their job interesting. I mean, obviously, pay is really important, but if they're the one person who does the terrible data entry all the way up to the research support, you do have to think about how to keep that job interesting, and also how to keep them from being isolated in that job when they're just the one person. And so part of that is sending them out to make connections with other staff people, which also has a benefit if you're building alliances, building connections to other centers. The question about reporting and things like that, one of the things is reporting to who and why about your successes and so on. And so we get a lot of pressure for numbers and things like that, but I always think that, so yeah, you have to do that. But putting together great stories in compelling documents that are professionally designed, that go out to your community members, to your potential donors, things like that, is perhaps, for me, ultimately more important, because then that money will flow back in, and that's the one statistic that they all care about, is the donor money that has come in. And so if you can report compelling stories in beautiful formats to the larger community, I think that is ultimately the best kind of reporting that you can do, even if it's not what is being asked of you by the senior administration.
I'm Gina Turner. I'm from the University of Oregon, the Oregon Humanities Center, and I think a big part of what we focus on at our center is to build relationships with anybody at any level, up or down the chain, sideways. And our center has a director, myself as the associate director, and we have 2 staff members. And our staff members have been there for a very long time. Part of it is because we have a stable salary band that they can stay in, and so they're not necessarily looking for other better, more high-paying jobs. But I think the real reason that they stay is because of the relationships that we have with each other. We care for each other, as you were saying, outside of work as well. But the relationships up the chain, I think in my time at the university, I've been there 13 years, and I think every year more and more I'm realizing the importance of the relationship with the people who we are reporting up to. I cannot emphasize that enough. So a few times a year, we are up through the VPRI, the Vice President for Research and Innovation, and a few times a year we invite him and in fact his staff, his chief of staff, and the financial manager to these luncheons with our faculty fellows so they can actually learn about what the humanities are. We've already had 7 VPRIs in like 8 years or something like that. So it is a constant turnover actually at that level, not at our staff level. So that's where our energy is focused.
Thank you. Yes.
Hi, I'm Uta Poiger from Northeastern University, and much enjoying this conversation. I actually wanted to throw something into the room that we didn't talk about at our table yet. We certainly, as Amanda mentioned, talked about really the intertwining of teaching, research, and community work via the humanities and the humanities centers. And I'm particularly interested in thinking about the ways in which AI is challenging us at this point. Both the constructive uses of AI, including in interactions and co-creation with community, and of course, as humanists, also the critique of the various forms of AI that is, proffering us news in particular ways. You all know the various problems that are arising with that. And so I was just a little bit struck by, when you summarized the challenges for the centers, that the challenge of AI wasn't on that list yet, and would just be curious to see what centers are doing in that context as well. Thanks.
Oops. Thank you. Anyone from the back rows who would like to share? Anyone? Anyone? I'll just keep walking until anyone stops me. No. Anyone at this table would like to share any collective wisdom? No. We can end early. I mean, that's the other thing, right? I mean, anyone who teaches knows this, right? Like, we don't have to just go, oh, wait, yeah, Aimee.
So I can just quickly speak to the AI thing, just very briefly. The Central New York Humanities Corridor does have a few working groups who are working on AI right now. I think in the past, I think we had questioned like whether or not some of them are like, is this really humanities? But I think this year it's like we just want to keep humanities in the conversation, so we weren't looking at it in the same way. And more groups had submitted proposals this past, like just a month ago we were doing this. They submitted proposals and they're looking at, like some of them are data scientists, some of them are in like philosophy doing ethics. So a lot of them are looking at ethics of AI, which is really important. So there are a lot of different like linguistics faculty, philosophers and ethicists also bringing in these data scientists and doing this work. So we're happy to fund these conversations. We're interested to see what comes out of it, but it is very important to keep humanities relevant and like insert ourselves into these conversations on our campuses because there is money for AI. So if your campus doesn't have a lot of funds, if you attach AI to it, your campus might throw money at it. So that's something to keep in mind.
Hi, everyone. My name is Helen Melko, Stanford Humanities Center. I'm an associate director there, and I have something about the AI, of course. So we are trying to insert ourselves in the conversation, and we are working with professors who are computer scientists, AI / any other humanities, so music and AI. We had a lecture by this amazing professor, and we had German professors, colleagues visiting that one event. It was amazing. Ethics and AI is a big deal. So as the Humanities Center ourselves, we are trying to get in and make ourselves present because, yes, you cannot do AI without humanities. But also other humanities departments are actually offering now courses. So Stanford is engaging with this topic from the humanities perspective. And we were surprised how many courses are actually happening on campus. So it's getting there. It's hard because they never think of us. We're thinking of them. So yeah, we're trying to work on that. Thanks.
Any other tables or people who'd like to say something about best practices? Yeah.
I think adding AI actually comes back to a really important point of thinking about Humanities Center administration, and that is what do we let go of? Because, you know, there are always new things. And what I found is that, particularly at our center, we've reached in some ways a saturation point that we are doing so many good and important things that we have no space anymore for either a new big thing or even sometimes for that faculty member who walks in and says, you know what I'd like to do? You know, like 10 years ago, I had a faculty member come in and say, you know what I'd like to do? I'd like to talk to fifth graders about philosophy with graduate students. I was like, okay. Now he has a network of 8 schools. Most of them are Title I schools. And, you know, he takes graduate students every year and they talk to fifth graders about philosophy. Like, if you were to come to me today, I'd be like, that sounds nice. Can't help you. But so I really, and now, you know, thinking about all of the new kinds of programming that AI, I think, demands from us, I'm like, where is that going to fit? And I think that really caused us to think very carefully in that reflection and review and reporting, where are things that we need to end, even if they are good, and even if they've been serving, because we can't. I liked what Rachel said about resilience to a fault. I think I've been feeling that personally. I know that I've been resilient to a fault. In some ways, our center has been resilient to a fault. We just keep doing all the things because they're good. And sometimes you have to let good things go. So, but still keep coming to CHCI. Don't cut that from your budget.
Okay, because I'm cognizant of both the time and the lunch, you will be our last person. Although you'll be our last person, but I was informed that Aaron put the link to the admin Google group on the Padlet. So please do use the Padlet robustly. Check out the resources. And then here you go. You're our last person.
No pressure. Sarah Betzer, University of Virginia. We had a great conversation. I'm hoping that Joe will be willing to post to the Padlet at some point something that came up in our conversation, which really taps into some of what we've heard now at a number of the tables about deciding what you're doing, bringing potentially a subtractive mindset, but also a kind of, ruthlessly, hierarchizing mindset. So at the London Center for Humanities, they think of things in terms of gold, silver, and bronze events. And so it's up to you. If what you really want to do is a shit ton of bronze events, you go crazy, but but that's a choice you're making as opposed to sort of big impact, strategically aligned events. And then there was a lot of discussion about how to talk to administrators, many of whom want to be helpful and good partners. And one of the, I think, strategic things that came out of that was thinking about how to communicate in terms of how you are the solution to what you understand to be an administrative challenge. That's a really great way to think about opening a conversation. Is there anything else that we... the subtractive mindset, this is a pitch for my colleague Lady Klotz's book called Subtraction, which tells us in a very few number of pages how we are wired as humans not to ever want to do that, but which is to say we need to bring that mindset to bear whenever we can.
You can all give yourselves a round of applause.